Good day, everyone. Today, we embark on a philosophical exploration of Pope Francis's Laudato Si, a groundbreaking encyclical that invites us to care for our common home. While we read as an environmental document, Laudato Si is far more than that. It is a philosophical vision of existence, a call to rediscover humanity's proper relationship with creation. We will journey through four central movements of thought: foundations, the roots of this vision in scripture and Christian tradition; crisis analyses, the human and moral roots of ecological degradation; integral ecology, the recognition that everything is connected; and lastly, action and spirituality, the paths toward ecological conversion. In each movement, we unfold a vital insight that the environmental crisis is not just scientific or political, but profoundly ethical and spiritual. That's something we have to pay attention to. Let's look at part one: the cry of Sister Earth. Pope Francis opens with a powerful philosophical image: Earth as our sister and mother. She cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her by our irresponsible use and abuse. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is a moral claim. By personifying the earth, Francis disrupts centuries of anthropocentric philosophy that saw nature as mere object, something to dominate, consume, or even discard. To hear the cry of the earth is to acknowledge moral responsibility. It calls us to see creation not as a possession, but as a partner in the drama of existence. Francis reminds us that more than 50 years ago, during the nuclear crisis, Pope John the 23rd already addressed humanity with an appeal to peace. That earlier encyclical, Pacem in Terris, was a philosophical response to essential danger. Similarly, Laudato Si is addressed to all people of goodwill. The ecological crisis is not a matter of faith alone. It is a matter of human survival. Nothing that affects the earth is indifferent to us. Every ecological wound is technically a human wound. The insight situates Laudato Si within a legacy of papal wisdom, a continuous moral tradition reflecting on human responsibility. Building on the reflections of his predecessors, Paul VI warned of tragic consequences of unchecked industrial civilization, what he called the threat of ecological catastrophe. John Paul II spoke of the need for ecological conversion, linking environmental concern with moral and spiritual renewal. Benedict XVI reminded us that the book of nature is one and indivisible, emphasizing that care for the environment cannot be separated from care for humanity. Together, these teachings form a moral, philosophical continuum, a developing consciousness that recognizes ecological concern as an expression of justice, solidarity, and respect for creation. Francis broadens the horizon further. Ecological reflection, he says, transcends religious boundaries. Laudato Si draws on insights from science, philosophy, theology, and civic action. Here we see the Catholic philosophical method at work, faith and reason in dialogue. And that's something we have to pay attention to. From the Patriarch Bartholomew, we hear the call to repent for sins against creation. From scientists, we receive empirical evidence of environmental collapse. From philosophers and ethicists, we hear the framework of moral responsibility. The ecological crisis, therefore, is not only a scientific or theological issue. It is an ethical horizon that demands interdisciplinary dialogue. It is here that we see Saint Francis of Assisi, the namesake of the encyclical, who embodies what the Pope calls integral ecology, a vision uniting concern for nature, justice for the poor, commitment to society, and inner peace. His reverence for every creature was not naive romanticism. It was a radical philosophy of relationality, a refusal to turn being into mere objects of control. In Francis's worldview, everything is gift, and every creature is kin. He saw that the world as a family is bound together by affection and, more importantly, divine purpose. This ancient intuition becomes the foundation for a new ecological philosophy, one that recognizes interconnectedness as the structures of reality itself. And that's something we can pay attention to. The philosophical crisis. What is happening to our common home? Before we can heal, we must dialogue and we must diagnose the sickness. And Francis identifies a central philosophical problem: the acceleration of human activity compared to the slow rhythms of nature. He calls this phenomenon rapidification. Rapidification. Nature evolves in slow, cyclical patterns. Ecosystems develop over centuries. Human progress, by contrast, moves with technological acceleration. It's linear, it's fast, and often it is blind. Between these two tempos lies an ethical gap. Our power has outpaced our wisdom. The question then is not simply technological, but moral. Can we act responsibly in proportion to our power? And this leads us to the throwaway culture. The crisis is not simply material, obviously, but it is material. But it is also cultural. We live in what he calls a throwaway culture, one that discards not only products, but people. People. One that throws away people. When we treat nature as disposable, we inevitably treat human life the same way. This is a philosophical failure. The inability to perceive intrinsic value beyond utility. Technology cautions often solves one problem only to create others, especially when linked to business interests divorced from ethics. Thus, ecological degradation is the visible sign of a deeper moral disorder, something that we need to pay attention to. The climate is a common good, belonging to all and meant for all. With these words, Francis makes a daring philosophical claim. He rejects the notion that climate stability can be treated as private property or economic commodity. Instead, he elevates it to a moral category, a shared inheritance that imposes duties to all. Scientific consensus supports this vision. The majority of experts agree that human activity drives moral global warming. Yet Francis moves beyond data to ethics, urging us to see the atmosphere as a relational good, not merely an environmental resource. And that's something we need to pay attention to. Francis continues, access to clean water is not a privilege, but a universal human right. Water, he says, is essential to human survival and a condition for the exercise of other human rights. This is a revolutionary claim. It shifts the discussion from economics to dignity. By grounding environmental ethics in human rights, Francis unites ecology and justice. When water is polluted or privatized, it is not just nature that suffers. it is humanity itself. Humanity itself. And that's something we need to pay attention to. The loss of biodiversity. Here, Francis challenges the utilitarian view of nature. Each species, he insists, has intrinsic value. Malaga, bawat isa. Not merely usefulness to humans, not merely on the basis of anong magagawa nito para sa akin. Biodiversity reflects the interconnection of all life forms, a vast web of relationships that sustains existence. The extinction, therefore, of even one species represents an irreversible loss, a diminishment of creation's richness. To destroy biodiversity is to erase words from the book of life itself. So far, what have we seen? Ecological crisis, it seems, is not merely technical, but also philosophical. It concerns how we understand ourselves, our time, our culture, and our responsibilities. In the next segment, we will discover how Francis connects environmental decay with the decline of human life quality, and how both arise from the same spiritual disorder. Our journey continues towards understanding not only the cry of the earth, but also the cry of the poor. The decline of human life quality basically shows that environmental and social degradation are not separate realities. They are two sides of the same broken relationship. Urban chaos, pollution, and the loss of green space are not merely ecological problems. They are symptoms of a deeper disorder in human life. When environment deteriorates, our human life deteriorates as well. We lose touch with beauty, with community, and with the very conditions that make joy possible. This is what Francis calls a failure of human ecology. The inability to recognize that the environment is the setting of our moral and social existence. To heal our cities, our communities, and our spirits, we must recover harmony with the natural world that sustains us. Global inequality. Francis reminds us that ecological destruction always strikes the poor first and the hardest. We need to strengthen the conviction, he writes, that we are one single human family. The statistics are striking. The wealthiest nations consume a disproportionate share of the planet's resources. 1/3 of all the food produced is wasted. Entire communities are disrupted by economic imbalance and environmental laws. The cry of the earth and the cry of the poor are one and the same. This insight challenges the illusion that we can care for the planet while ignoring injustice. For Francis, ecological ethics must always be social ethics. They are inseparable. Ecological debt. Francis introduces a striking philosophical concept, ecological debt. He argues that the global north owes a moral debt to the global south. For centuries of resource extraction and even environmental harm. This is more than an economic argument. It is a call for ethical restitution. It recognizes that development built upon exploitation cannot be sustained without justice. Here we see Francis's bold move. He extends the concept of debt from finance to morality, redefining what we owe to one another as members of a single planet. He identifies three weak responses. Why then, he asks, do we fail to act decisively? Francis identifies three root causes: political failure, a lack of vision and courage to lead transformative change, economic interests, short-term profit taking precedence over long-term well-being, cultural decline, the erosion of shared values, and ethical commitment. This diagnosis is not cynical. It is prophetic. It invites us to see that the environmental crisis cannot be solved by technology alone. It requires moral renewal. Our civilization's tools have outpaced our virtues. We must now learn again how to see, to value, and to act with conscience. The gospel of creation. After analyzing the crisis, Francis turns to a deeper question. He asks, who are we then? And what is our place in creation? This is the philosophical heart of Laudato Si, a vision of the human person in right relationship with God, neighbor, and earth. Francis constructs what we might call a philosophical anthropology, an understanding of the human being not as a master of the world, but as its steward and participant. He proposes that faith and reason, theology and philosophy must engage in mutual dialogue to rebuild this vision. And that leads us to the light offered by faith. Francis is careful here to honor the autonomy of science, but is careful also with that of philosophy. But he also reminds us that faith offers a distinct light, one that reveals meaning and value beyond what empirical methods can capture. Faith and reason, he writes, can enter into intense dialogue, which is fruitful for both. Fruitful for both. Sorry. Scripture provides narratives of creation and covenant, relationship of trust, stories that root human beings within a moral cosmos. Reason offers philosophical and scientific understanding of the world's structure and even processes, and together they illuminate both the facts and meaning of creation. This dialogue between faith and reason is not only optional, or it is the foundation of integral ecology. Let's look at biblical wisdom. Francis identifies three stories or three relationships that define the human condition. With God, recognizing the Creator's gift and sovereignty. With neighbor, living in solidarity and even mutual relationship. And with earth, acting as stewards of creation. When sin enters, all three relationships are broken at once. Thus, ecological conversion is not just about the environment, it is about healing the rapture of existence itself. To restore harmony with creation, we must restore harmony with God and with one another. Domination rightly understood. One of the most misunderstood phrases in Scripture is God's command to humanity, have dominion over the earth. Francis corrects centuries of distortion. Dominion, he insists, does not mean domination. It means responsible stewardship, to till and keep the garden. When dominion becomes domination, exploitation follows. But when domination is understood as care, it reflects God's own creative love, ordering the world toward flourishing. This is philosophy in the service of justice, redefining power as responsibility. Here we move to the concept of the intrinsic value of creation. Drawing from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, or CCC, Francis reminds us each creature possesses its own particular goodness and perfection. In other words, the value of creation is intrinsic, not instrumental. A river has worth not because it irrigates crops, but because it is part of the harmony of life. A mountain is not valuable only for its minerals, but for its being. This principle counters modern utilitarianism, the mindset that measures worth only by usefulness. To respect creation is therefore to acknowledge the goodness, that precedes our control, and therefore something that always already opens us to the mystery of the universe. Francis offers a breathtaking cosmology here. The universe, he says, does not open because of chaos or chance. It is born of divine love. Every particle, every star, every living thing is an expression of what he calls the order of love. Ordo amoris. These transforms our understanding of existence. If creation is the product of love, then the proper human response is reverence, not exploitation. Even the smallest creatures, he say, is the object of the Father's tenderness. Here, philosophy meets poetry and ethics flows from wonder. In the next segments, we will see how Francis explores the philosophical transformation that occurred in Judeo-Christian thought, the demythologizing of nature, and how that shift calls us today to renewed responsibility. We will also examine the themes of human uniqueness, universal communion, and the common destiny of all creation. The gospel of creation invites us to see the world not as a raw material, but as revelation, a mirror of divine wisdom. Let us carry that vision forward. The mythologizing nature. In Judeo-Christian thought, nature ceased to be divine. It was demythologized, freed from the ancient belief that mountains, rivers, and stars were gods in themselves. Francis is in this a double insight. One, human responsibility. Because nature is not divine, we may not worship it. Instead, we are called to care for it as God's gift. Two, nature's autonomy. Creation possesses its own integrity, its own set of laws, which must be respected, therefore, and not violated for selfish ends. And we need to pay attention at that. These philosophical shift liberated humanity from superstition. Yet it also imposed a sacred duty. And what is that sacred duty that it imposed? To guard what we understand. To guard what we understand. To know nature is not to own it. To name creation is not to control it. Human uniqueness and universal communion. Francis confronts a classic philosophical tension here. The uniqueness of human beings versus our inclusion within the web of life. Humans alone possess reason, love, and moral responsibility, capacities that mark our transcendence. Yet these gifts blind us, not separate us from creation. We are not rulers above the world, but conscious participants within it. Our intellect and our freedom do not justify domination. They deepen obligation. Francis writes that we are part of a universal family of creatures. This is a vision of radical interconnectedness, a communion of being where every creature mirrors the divine and sustains the rest. The message of each creature. The universe as a whole, then, in all its manifold relationships, shows forth the inexhaustible riches of God. Each creature, Francis tells us, has a message to convey. The world, then, is not mute. It is a living text, a sacrament of meaning. To see the world philosophically is to read it as revelation. The rhythm of the seasons speaks of order. The cooperation of species reveal interdependence. Even decay testifies to renewal. The challenge is not that the world is silent. It is that we have forgotten how to listen. This leads us to the universal communion. Francis calls this awareness a sublime communion. All of us are linked by unseen bonds and together form a kind of universal family. This statement stands in sharp contrast to the individualism that defines modern philosophy, where modernity often celebrates autonomy. Francis celebrates relationships. To exist is to coexist. To be human is to participate in the mutual belonging of all things. Ecological ethics, therefore, begins not with command, but with communion. A reverent awareness that everything is connected. The common destination of goods. Francis turns now to the ethics of possession. The earth is the Lord's, declares Psalm 24. From this biblical principle arises a profound social teaching. Private property has a social mortgage. In philosophical terms, ownership is never absolute. Ownership is relational. The goods of the earth are meant to benefit all. This principle confronts economic systems that prioritize accumulation over equity. It asks a radical question. Do our possessions serve life? Or does life serve possessions? When the earth's fruits are hoarded by a few, the moral order of creation is violated. Is violated. the gaze of Jesus. To understand how humans ought to relate to creation, Francis invites us to contemplate the gaze of Jesus. Jesus looked upon the lilies of the field, the birds of the air, the sower and the seed, not as metaphors, but as living realities filled with divine meaning. His gaze was contemplative, not possessive. Through his incarnation, matter itself was sanctified. When we work, when we build, when we cultivate, we participate in this sanctified labor. To work in union with Christ is to collaborate in the redemption of creation. To work in union with Christ is to collaborate with the redemption of creation. The human roots of crisis. Having explored the theological vision, Francis returns to philosophical diagnosis. He asks, why has humanity turned against its own home? The answer lies in the misuse of one of our greatest gifts, technology. Technology, he says, is neither enemy nor savior. It is an expression of human creativity, a gift capable of beauty and transformation. Yet, when severed from wisdom and ethics, it becomes ambiguous and even dangerous. The problem is not invention, but intention. Our devices are brilliant, but our discernment is dim. The basic problem, Francis writes, goes deeper than technology itself. It is the way humanity has taken up technology within a one-dimensional paradigm. This technocratic paradigm reduces all reality to measurable data and usable matter. It transforms the world from gift into object. Let's look at some of the characteristics of this technocratic paradigm. Reductionism, the complexity simplified into numbers. Domination, nature treated as raw material. Fragmentation, the laws of holistic understanding. Instrumentalization, everything valued only for utility. The result is not mastery, but alienation. We become strangers in the world we have built. And here we see the globalization of the paradigm. Francis warns that this paradigm now shapes not only machines, but minds as well. It has globalized its logic, governing economics, politics, and even culture. Efficiency becomes the highest value, relationship the lowest. This is what Francis calls a philosophical colonization, a subtle domination of thought in which technical power replaces a moral vision. When everything is reduced to productivity, What becomes of beauty, of community, of grace? To recover our humanity, we must reclaim the plurality of waves of knowing, art, contemplation, spirituality, and wonder. The root of the crisis is actually a misguided anthropocentrism. Misguided anthropocentrism. A distorted human-centeredness that sees the self as absolute. When we place ourselves at the center, all else becomes relative, truth, morality, even life itself. He calls this practical relativism, the belief that convenience determines right and wrong. It leads inevitably to ecological destruction, social exploitation, and moral confusion. True humanism, by contrast, recognizes that to be human is to be responsible, not sovereign. Freedom without ethics is not liberation, it is ruin. In the succeeding slides, in the next 10 slides, we will see how Francis deepens this critique, exploring the dignity of human work, the limits of biological technology, and the emergence of a comprehensive philosophy he calls integral ecology. The challenge of our age is clear: to use power without losing soul, to build without destroying, to progress without forgetting the purpose of progress itself. Francis reminds us that work is not merely an economic function. Work is a human vocation. Work allows people to participate in creation, to shape the world, and to grow in dignity. It is the space where creativity meets responsibility. Yet in a technocratic culture, human labor is often devalued or replaced by automation and profit-driven efficiency. And Francis challenges us. Technology must serve human flourishing, not replace it. When work becomes precarious, when workers are discarded like outdated tools, something essential in our humanity is lost. To protect employment is therefore a moral act, an affirmation that the economy exists for the person, not the person for the economy. So we need to look at biological technologies and ethical limits. Francis acknowledges the power of modern biology and genetics. Yet, he cautions that with great power comes great moral gravity. Human intervention in nature is legitimate only when it serves genuine needs and respects the integrity of creation. So the questions we must always ask are, what are the goals? Who benefits? What are the risks? If our innovations create profit but destroy balance, we have failed ethically. The measure of progress is not what we can do, but what we ought to do. Ethical limits are not barriers to freedom. They are boundaries that make freedom meaningful. Having traced our ecological crisis, Francis proposes an alternative worldview, what he calls integral ecology. This is more than environmentalism. It is a philosophy of connection. Everything is closely interrelated, he writes, and today's problems call for a vision capable of taking into aspect every aspect of our global crisis. Integral ecology unites the environmental, the social, the cultural, and the moral dimensions of life. It is a way of seeing the world as one dynamic whole, not as a set of isolated problems. In short, integral ecology is a new metaphysics for a fractured age, a reminder that being itself is relational. Let's look at the 5 dimensions of integral ecology. Francis identifies several inseparable dimensions. 1, environmental, the natural system that sustains us. 2, economic, how resources are used, even shared. 3rd, social, the structures of human community. 4th, cultural, the traditions and identities that give meaning. 5th, daily life, the spaces where ethics becomes habit. These are not compartments, but interwoven threads of one fabric. To pull one strand is to affect them all. Thus, any authentic solution must honor the wholeness of life. Environmental, economic, and social ecology. Francis writes, we are faced not with 2 separate crises, one environmental and the other social, but with one complex crisis that is both. This is a philosophical breakthrough. It rejects the modern dichotomy that separates nature from society. When forests are destroyed, the poor suffer. When inequality rises, economic systems collapse under reckless consumption. Therefore, ecological solutions must also be social solutions. Justice for the poor, sustainable economies, and policies rooted in solidarity. Next, cultural ecology. Francis reminds us that cultural diversity is as vital as biological diversity. When cultures vanish, humanity loses its memory and imagination. The disappearance of people's language or ritual is as tragic as the extinction of a species. He gives attention to indigenous communities, calling them principal dialogue partners in environmental decisions. Their traditions carry ecological wisdom, patterns of respect and restraint born from generations of coexistence with the land. To preserve culture is therefore to preserve meaning. The deep ecology of the human spirit. Ecology in daily life. Integral ecology, Francis says, must enter our homes, neighborhoods, and cities. The places where we live shape how we think, feel, and act. Urban planning, housing, and architecture are not neutral. They are moral choices. Spaces that isolate breed indifference. Spaces that invite encounter, build community. A just ecology must therefore include the dignity of living environments, clean air, safe homes, public spaces that nurture beauty and belonging. Ecological renewal begins not in distant forests, but at the kitchen table, in the way we design, consume, and dwell. Human ecology and moral law. Human ecology, Francis writes, also implies another profound reality: the relationship between human life and the moral law inscribed in our nature. To respect creation, we must also respect the truth of our own being. We cannot manipulate our humanity as though it were raw material. Our bodies are gifts, not commodities. To accept our limits is to affirm our place within the order of creation. Therefore, the rejection of moral order leads to the rejection of natural order. Ecology or ecological harmony depends upon anthropological humility, knowing who we are and who we are not. This leads us to principles of common good. At the moral core of integral ecology stands a classic philosophical idea: the common good. The common good. The common good is the sum of those conditions of social life that allow groups and individuals to reach their fulfillment more fully and easily. It includes respect for individual dignity, promotion of social welfare, pursuit of distributive justice, and commitment to social peace. Francis insists that caring for the planet is inseparable from caring for one another. The Earth's well-being and the human common good rise or fall together. justice between generations. Finally, Francis introduces a concept of temporal ethics, justice between generations. He calls intergenerational solidarity not optional, but a basic question of justice. The world belongs not only to us, but to those who come after us. What world do we want to live? He poses the haunting question. What kind of world do we want to leave to children who are now growing up? This question forces us beyond environmental management into moral reflection. It asks about meaning, purpose, and destiny. The ecological crisis is ultimately a crisis of values. We must decide whether we will be ancestors of hope or agents of loss. In the next slides, we will move from principles to practice, examining Francis's call for dialogue, political courage, and ethical action at every level, international, national, and local. Integral economy shows us the map. Now we must learn to walk the path with wisdom, solidarity, and faith. Let's look at lines of action. Having laid out the philosophical and moral foundations of Laudato Si, Pope Francis now turns towards action, the translation of principles into practice. He calls this section lines of action, but these are more than policy recommendations. They are philosophical imperatives, ways of living the truth we have come to see. The heart of this call is dialogue. Dialogue between nations, between politics and economy, between science and religion, and between human beings and the earth itself. Global dialogue. Francis urges the international community to rediscover see humanity as one people living in a common home. The global vision requires 3 essential steps: recognition, acknowledging our interdependence; responsibility, accepting differentiated obligations since some nations bear greater burdens than others; and action, implementing real and binding agreements, not symbolic promises. For Francis, the ecological crisis will not be overcome by diplomacy alone, but by a conversion of worldview from competition to communion. And so while global cooperation is necessary, Francis reminds us that change is equally local. Communities, parishes, and even families can make a real difference. Grassroots efforts, from renewable energy cooperatives to community gardens, reveal that environmental renewal begins from below. This decentralization of responsibility echoes a profound philosophical principle: subsidiarity, that the most human problems are solved best at the most human scale. Change happens where people belong, in neighborhoods, towns, and networks of care. Networks of care. Dialogue and transparency in decision making. Francis demands that environmental decisions be made through authentic democracy, not through the invisible hand of markets or technocratic elites. He proposes a moral framework for all environmental deliberation: information, honest disclosure of risks and alternatives; participation, inclusion of all affected communities; deliberation, open discussion of values, not only costs; precaution, shifting the burden of proof only those proposing risky projects. This is not only a bureaucratic process, it is an ethical method. Truth emerges not from power, but from participation. Participation. Politics and economy in dialogue. One of the most striking statements in Laudato Si declares, politics must not be subject to the economy, nor should the economy be subject to the dictates of an efficiency-driven paradigm of technocracy. Here, Francis challenges the modern idol of economic autonomy. He calls instead for the primacy of ethics, the subordination of profit to the common good. When political decisions are ruled by markets, both democracy and nature suffer. The economy must once again serve humanity, guided by moral reason, compassion, and justice. Rethinking progress. Francis asks us to rethink what we mean by progress. He warns that technological and economic development, which does not create a better world, one that truly enhances human and ecological well-being, cannot be called progress at all. True progress, he says, is measured not by GDP or consumption, but by flourishing, by love, beauty, solidarity, and sustainability. This is not just nostalgia for the past. It is a redefinition of the future. Progress without purpose is regress disguised as advancement. He includes religion here. He says that there has to be an alliance between science and religion. He insists that these two forms of knowledge are not enemies, but partners. Science teaches us how things work. Religion teaches us why they matter. When combined, they offer a fuller vision of truth, empirical, moral, and spiritual. Francis explains, the dialogue between science and religion can be fruitful for both. Where science provides precision, faith offers purpose. Together, they cultivate a civilization that is both intelligent and compassionate. Ecological education. Ultimately, Francis knows that no policy can endure without a challenge or change of consciousness. Ecological renewal must begin in the heart and in the imagination through what he calls ecological education. Education here is not merely information transfer, it is formation, the cultivation of habits, virtues, vision. This education seeks to shape a new human being, one who sees the world not as a property, but as communion, thus pushing forward a new lifestyle. A new lifestyle. Francis calls for nothing less than a cultural revolution. He invites us to move from the logic of consumption to the logic of contemplation, from having to being. He writes that the consumerist model has trapped humanity in compulsive desire, an endless cycle of acquisition without satisfaction. The antidote, he says, is simplicity. Not poverty, but simplicity. Freedom from possession. To live simply is to live more deeply. To consume less is to love more. This new lifestyle is not a loss. It's a liberation. It's not a loss, but a liberation. The power of consumer choices. Francis reminds us that purchasing is always moral, not merely economic act. Every choice in the marketplace is also a choice about the world we want to sustain. When we support ethical production, fair trade, and ecological responsibility, we become agents of transformation. But Francis also appeals to something deeper, the power of beauty. When learning to see and appreciate beauty, he writes, we learn to reject self-interested pragmatism. Beauty awakens gratitude, humility, reverence. It restores the moral imagination that consumerism has dulled. In beauty, we encounter the world not as a resource, but as revelation. This is the beginning of ecological conversion, the awakening of the heart to the sacredness of life. As we close this lecture, we return to its central theme. Everything is connected. Francis has shown us that ecological renewal is not just about policies or practices. It is about a new way of being human. It is the rediscovery of our place within creation. As stewards, not masters. As participants, not spectators. As companions, not conquerors. To care for our human home is to care for the soul. The philosophical challenge of Laudato Si is to live in communion, communion with the earth, with one another, and with the mystery that holds all things together. Praise be to you, my Lord, through all your creatures. This lecture is dedicated to Father John Ray C.B. of the Diocese of Maasin, dear friend and faithful companion. Your wisdom, kindness, and steadfast spirit have been a source of strength and light along this philosophical journey. May this work stand out as a small tribute to our shared search for truth, beauty, and the care of our common home. To all who have listened and and was with me throughout the process, thank you very much for listening.